All right. Shalom, shalom, shalom. All right. It is October 13th, 3:09 Eastern Time. I'm going to continue the live from yesterday. Yesterday I talked a lot about Revelation 21. Today I'm going to go into the rest of Revelation 21, starting at verse 21, all the way into Revelation 21. Hoping to break down Revelation, hoping to break down the temple, the tabernacle that comes down, the new heaven, the new earth. I'm going to do a slight recap of verses in Revelation 21. I'm going to do a slight recap of the first 20 verses, and then as we go into Revelations 22, we'll talk about that as well. So, slight recap. So I'm going to kind of summarize what we talked about in Revelation 21. The first thing that John saw the new heavens and the new earth descending out of heaven, descending out of the Shamayim. So, and we made the illusion of that new heavens and the new earth to be that incorruptible body, that going from the corruptible to the incorruptible, that new body that that's promised. We talked about that new heaven and that new earth, what it would be. The next thing that he saw the tabernacle coming down, and the tabernacle came down as a wife adorned for her husband. And it's interesting when we look at that adorning, we look at having a new garment on, because we know in a wedding, a wife has a white garment on, right? That white represents purity, right? So we taken that old garment off and we've putting on a new garment, right? So we have that new garment. That new garment represents our purity. It represents being clothed in the spirit, okay? And then we talked about the jewels, the 12 different kinds of jewels that were adorned. So those jewels represent pureness. They represent wealth, and not wealth as in physical wealth or as in worldly wealth, but wealth of the spirit, okay? So just looking at that tabernacle coming down, being adorned like a wife adorned for her husband, that is a representation of us coming down, us being prepared for the marriage supper of the Lamb. That is us being prepared and finally ready. It's that 8th day. We talked about that 8th day. That 8th day is when your heart is circumcised, all right? It's the circumcision of the heart. If you know anything about Hebraic law, if you know anything about the law of Moshe, you know that on the 8th day, the male sons were circumcised. Why were they circumcised? They were circumcised on the 8th day in their foreskin, and that represents that circumcision, that cutting away. Moshe told the people that they had to be circumcised in their heart, though, right? So circumcised in their heart on that 8th day would be the cutting away of that flesh, the cutting away of that part of you, that those evil desires, all right, those evil wants, cutting those things away. So this Revelation 21 represents that 8th day, the 8th day when we are ready and prepared to receive the Messiah, all right? So that's a brief summary. I know we went into some other things. We talked about the wall, the 144,000 cubit wall. We talked about the different stones. We talked about the foundations of the apostles. We talked about the 12 gates, 3 on each side, and we talked about our gates being guarded by the law. So those were, that's just a brief summary of kind of where we went yesterday in reference to Revelation 21. So what I want to do now is I want to start at verse 21, Revelations 21:21. All right. Okay, Revelations 21:21. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every several gate was of one pearl. And the street of the city was pure gold, as it were transparent glass. All right, so on each of the gates is a pearl, right? On each of the 12 gates is a pearl, right? That purity, that pearl represents purity, right? And then the street of the city was pure gold. Pure gold, we know gold represents, it represents, worth. It represents something that is valuable, right? So, and the gold is so pure that it's transparent like glass. So there's no impurities. There's no impurities in the gold of the streets of the city. All right, this is really interesting when we get to this point. All right, when we get to verse 22, it says, "And I saw no temple therein, for Yahuwah Elohim Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it." So you have this city, and in the middle, there's no temple in the city. So this is interesting because when we look at there not being a temple there, right? Think back to being in the wilderness. There was a tabernacle. Think back to David. Think back to Solomon, who built the actual temple, the first temple. The city always had a temple within, a temple that was contained in that city. This city does not have a temple, meaning we have the real thing, right? Inside of us, when we look at the center of us, of who we are, right? We look at our inward being. So this temple represents our hearts, and in our hearts, we only have room for Yahuwah Elohim, and we have room for the Lamb. So our temple, the temple of our hearts, contains the Lamb. So we're at that point where we contain the Lamb. The Lamb is contained. The Yahuwah is contained in our hearts, right? So our temple is now filled, all right? Our temple is filled. So there's no, in the city that that John saw coming down, he saw the city without a temple, but he saw in the midst of the city, he saw the Lamb, and he saw Yahuwah Elohim. So that represents our hearts. So in our hearts, we will have Yahuwah and we'll have the Lamb. They will be in our hearts at that time. So remember, this is us when we go from being corruptible to incorruptible. When we put off of that corruptible and put on the incorruptible, where our hearts are circumcised. Even goes back to Joshua 31:31, Jeremiah 31:31. Excuse me for that. Jeremiah 31:31 is where we talk about the new covenant, and I'm gonna hit on that real quick in Jeremiah 31:31, because this is a good precept about when we enter into the new covenant. How are we going to enter into the new covenant? What is it going to look like for us to be in that new covenant? All right. So Jeremiah 31:31 goes and says, "Behold, the days come, saith Yahuwah, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Yasharal and with the house of Judah. Not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers in the day that I took them by the hand to bring them out of the land of Egypt, which, my covenant they break, although I was a husband unto them, saith Yahuwah." Always alluding back to being a husband, right? We're always alluding back to that marriage. Remember, that law is like your wedding vows. When we were bound to Yahuwah, the law was our vows. That was the vows that we took. Those vows were expected to be kept, but we broke those vows, right? All right, to get into the part that we just talked about, "But this shall be the covenant that I will make with the house of Yasharal after those days, saith Yahuwah. I will put my law in their inward parts," right? So the Lamb, We just found that in that city, in the midst of the city, the Lamb and Yahuwah were in the midst, no temple. So that's his law. So he's putting his law in your inward parts. And I'll write it in their hearts, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people. So when he talks about the new covenant, this is that time that he's talking about, where he writes his law on our hearts, and that he will be our Elohim, and we will be his people. Listen to verse 34. And they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahuwah, for they shall all know me. The only way that everyone can know and wouldn't have to be taught by their neighbor is if Yahuwah was already present within us, right? So Yahuwah is present in our heart, in the temple of our heart. Yahuwah is present in our heart, and that's how we know him, okay? That's how we know him. So no one has to teach me about him. I carry him in my heart. That's the new covenant. So when I carry him in my heart, and I don't need to be taught, because Yahuwah and his word resides in my heart. Let's keep going. And every man his brother, saying, Know Yahuwah, for they shall all know me, from the least of them unto the greatest of them, saith Yahuwah, for I will forgive their iniquity, and I will remember their sin no more. All right, so Yahuwah, this is the part where sin is done away with. Sin is swallowed up. We talked yesterday about sin and death being swallowed up. Sin and death are swallowed up at this point in time, and at this point in time, we carry Yahuwah, we carry the Lamb within us, and they can dwell there as a dwelling place because sin and death have been swallowed up. Okay, and since we're able to carry them in our hearts, then in our inner being, in our temples, then no one has to teach us at that point. You don't have to be taught at that point, because you know him, because he dwells there. You know him, you know his law. His law is written on your hearts and on your minds. So it's not so at that point in time, it's not going to be a work to keep the law. We're not going to have to work to keep the law. There's not going to be a work to keep the law. It's not. It's going to be that we're going to keep the law. And I don't want to say that we programmed to keep the law. I don't want to give that impression. But it's going to be automatic that we keep the law. The law is going to be kept automatically. And that's all we're going to want to do. Because in our heart, the only thing that's in our heart is Yahuwah and the Lamb. Yahuwah and Yahusha. Right? That's what our heart contains. All right, so let's get back to Revelation 21. All right, that was a good precept, though. Okay, so going back to Revelation 21, we left off at verse 22. Let's look at verse 23. And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon, to shine in it, for the glory of Elohim did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. So, here we go. Now the city doesn't need any light, because the light that's in it, we're lit by Yahuwah, we're lit by the Lamb. That's the light, right? So, when you look at the sun and the moon have been objects of worship ever since probably the beginning of time, right? Hold on, let me take a sip of this. The sun and the moon have been objects of worship, right? At this time, because we contain Yahuwah, because we contain Yahusha within our heart, there's no need for any artificial light. We have the real light, the real thing. The real thing is within us, right? That real light is emanating from us. We don't need artificial light. We don't need the light of the sun and the light of the moon. We have the real light. We have that light that was promised. We contain that light is within us. So we don't need any light outside of us. So the only light that we need is that light within. So that's what he's saying, is there's no need for a sun or moon at this time, because we will have a light, and that light will be within us, and that light will be Yahusha, and Yahuwah will be that light. Verse 24, and the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it, and the kings of the earth do bring their glory and honor into it. So we're going to the nations. So at this time, this 8th day, there will be people that were spared. There will be nations that were spared. That word saved in this instance in verse 24 means spared. It means more than not necessarily salvation, but it means those nations that were spared. So those nations that are spared, they will walk in that light, because that will be the only light. There will not be any other light. There won't be light of worship of any other gods or deities or anything. It'll only be Yahuwah and Yahusha. So the nations will have to walk in that light. When you have a great king, right, you have to bring that king tribute. So the nations will come in with the wealth of the earth, and they will bring tribute. They will bring tribute to the king. They will bring tribute and honor to it. Let's look at verse 25. And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, for there shall be no night there. So that means there'll never be darkness. So your heart will never be dark again. So at the point is, because we contain Yahuwah and Yahusha within us, that there will never be darkness again within us, right? So there'll always be light. Therefore, the gates will be open, right? The gates will be open to receive, right? And remember, it's going to tell us, though, who could enter the gates. We're going to get there in a second. And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. That's verse 26. And in verse 27 is, and there shall be in no wise enter into it anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's book of life. So there won't be any outside corruption that can come into this place. So we're talking about our bodies. We're talking about our gates being open, but our gates not taking in corruption. No corruption can enter into our gates, the gates of our eyes, gates of our mouth, the gates of our ears, that corruption won't be able to enter in. Okay? All right. So that takes us to the end of Revelation 21. We're going to briefly jump into Revelation 22 because he's further looking at the city. Remember, when John first had this vision, he saw the city from afar, and he saw it descending, and then the angel came to him and said that the angel was going to show him the city up close. So now this is John, part of John seeing the wall, part of John seeing the streets of gold, part of John seeing the different attributes of the city. Is the angel showing him the city in close proximity. Okay. All right. So verse 22, chapter 22, verse 1. And he showed me a pure river of water of life, clear as crystal, proceeding out of the throne of Elohim and out of the Lamb. So now this pure river that's proceeding, this river of life, right? That is the eternal life. That is that pure water. That's that water that Yahusha said to the lady at the well, that if you drink from me, that you'll never thirst again. It's that water. That water is proceeding out of the Lamb and proceeding out of Yahuwah, meaning it's coming from them. They're the source of it. They're the source of this pure water, this life. Your life is now coming directly from Yahuwah and Yahusha. So your life and the it's clear as crystal, meaning it's pure. There's no impurities in that water. That water is pure. There's no impurities, okay? Looking at us and that river flowing through us, right? Being washed with the word, right? we're being washed by that word. That word is the purifying thing, the thing that purifies us. That's the thing that's given us life, is that word. It's given us life. All right, verse 2. In the midst of the street of it, and on either side of the river, was there the tree of life, which bare 12 manner of fruits, and yielded her fruit every month. And the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. So it says, in the midst of the street of it. So in the middle, right? So in the middle of the street, there's a tree of life, right? And on either side of the river, so in the midst of the street, there's a tree of life. And then on either side of the river was it a tree of life, which bare 12 manners of fruit, meaning that it bore a fruit in each month. At this time, we will be fruitful. We will be fruitful, and we will bear fruit every month. We will bear fruit consistently, constantly bearing fruit. So you have different trees. You have the tree in the midst, right? Remember, in the midst was the throne of the Lamb and the throne of Yahuwah. In the midst is that tree of life. And then on each side of the river is us. It's the people. The people are planted. They're planted by that pure water. So that pure water, only that doctrine is the only doctrine that we have access to. It's the only doctrine that feeds us, that nurtures us. It's the only doctrine that we desire. So we are feeding on that pure river of life. We are, at that point, gifted with eternal life. And then it goes on to say that the leaves of the tree were for the healing of the nations. Remember, it talked about the nations being outside of the city, and it talked about the nations bringing tribute into the city. So for the nations, when they bring their tribute into the city, they are able to get the healing through the bringing the tribute, through bringing that honor unto the king. Then they're able to get their healing. They get their healing by coming before the king, right? The leaves of the tree is for the healing of the nations. All right, verse 3. And there shall be no more curse, but the throne of Elohim and of the Lamb shall be in it, and his servants shall serve him. So the throne in the midst again. No more curse. The curse is done away with. The curse has been taken away at this point, right? Verse 4. And they shall see his face, and his name shall be in their foreheads. So now, we shall see his face at this time, right? So seeing his face means seeing him how he is, or as he is. We will be able to see his face. We'll be in a position where we're able to see his face. I'm going to take you to, I think, Exodus. And this is when Moshe had desired to see Yahuwah. Hold on a second. Let's see if I can find this for us. And I'm just going to do a little contrast when Moshe asked to see his face. All right, let's see here. All right. Let's see. Okay, so let's see. Let's go to Exodus 33, starting at verse 11. Exodus 33, starting at verse 11. Okay. I just want to see if that's it. I don't know if that's what I need yet. Still looking. I'm not sure if that's what I need. No, okay. Yeah.
Both of you?
Yeah, yeah, yep.
Oh, okay. I didn't want to bother you on the phone.
Okay. Um. Okay, here we go. No, that's not what I'm looking for. That's not what I'm looking for. Let me go. Let me look. And if I can't find it, I'll. Yeah, I think it is Exodus 33. Hold on. For some reason, I don't see it. Oh, okay, here it is. Exodus 33. Um, let's start at 19, 33, 19. And he said, I will make all my goodness, this is Yahuwah, pass before thee, and I will proclaim the name of Yahuwah before thee, and will be gracious to whom I will be gracious, and I will show mercy on whom I will show mercy. And he said, thou canst not see my face, for there shall be no man see me and live. All right, so we know. So we just talked about that we would be able to see his face. So when Moshe had desired to see his face, Moshe wasn't able to see his face. Moshe wasn't in a glorified body, right? Moshe wasn't able to withstand the glory of Yahuwah. When we are glorified and when he's dwelling within us, we'll be able to see him as he is. Okay, we'll be able to see him as he is. So let's go back to Revelation 22. Back to Revelation 22. And it says, and his name shall be in their foreheads. If someone's name is in your foreheads, your forehead is your frontal lobe. That's where your frontal lobe is located, right? That frontal lobe controls, it controls your organization. It controls kind of like your self-regulation. It controls, some very major functions. So that frontal lobe, meaning that his name will be there, is meaning that we will be submissive unto Yahuwah. His name will be written in our foreheads. It doesn't say on, it says in our foreheads, right? Meaning that name will be what is that'll be the thing that regulates us, is his name. Okay. Verse 5. And there shall be no night there, and they need no candle, neither the light of the sun. For Yahuwah Elohim giveth them light, and they shall reign forever and ever. So it's talking about the people. The people don't need any other light. Yahuwah is our only light. We'll have the actual light at this time. There'll be no need for the artificial light. And if you want to go back to Genesis, Yahuwah said, let there be light before he created the sun and the moon. So there's a light outside of the sun and the moon, right? There's a light that existed outside the sun and the moon. If he said, let there be light, and then there was light, and then he didn't create the sun and the moon until the fourth day, that means there was another light that was present for those first 3 days. Okay? There was another light that was present that first 3 days until the artificial light was created. Verse 6, and he shall be unto me, and he said unto me, these sayings are faithful and true. And Yahuwah Elohim of the holy prophets sent his angel to show unto his servants the things which must shortly be done. Verse 7, this is Yahusha speaking. Behold, I come quickly. Blessed is he that keepeth the sayings of the prophecy of this book. And verse 8, and I, John, saw these things and heard them, And when I had heard and seen, I fell down to worship before the feet of the angel which showed me these things. Then saith he unto me, See, thou do it not, for I am thy fellow servant and thy brethren the prophets, and of thy brethren the prophets, and of them which keep the sayings in this book, worship Elohim. So the angel's telling him to worship Elohim. You worship Elohim. I showed you these great things by the power of Elohim, but don't worship me. John saw these things, and then he immediately fell down and worshiped at the feet of the angel. And then the angel told him not to do that. You only worship Elohim. We're going to stop at verse 13. We'll stop at verse 13 today. And he said unto me, Seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. He that is unjust, let him be unjust still. And he which is filthy, let him be filthy still. And he that is righteous, let him be righteous still. And he that is holy, let him be holy still. Verse 11 is just, it's really still. Verse 11 is just, it's really reiterating. People are going to default and be true to who they really are. So an unrighteous person is going to be unrighteous. Even though they may live righteously for a little while, ultimately they're going to be unrighteous. A holy person, they may fall and slip and live unholy for a while, but they're going to end up being a holy person. So it's like, be who you are. That who you are is going to come out regardless, okay? Verse 12, and behold, I come quickly, and my reward is with me, to give every man according as his work shall be. So, his reward is with him. What's his reward? His reward is our renewed bodies, our incorruptible bodies. That reward is with him. So when he comes, he has that reward with him. So if you receive him, and you know him, and he's yours, you will receive that reward. If you don't receive that reward, you won't receive that incorruptible body. His reward is with him. Okay? That's the reward that Yahusha has with him. All right? And then verse 12. Oh, yeah. That was verse to give to every man according as his work shall be. That reward is based on, and everybody says, oh, it's not of works, not of works, not of works, not of works. But your works are demonstrated, the works that you demonstrated are determined on that faith. So if you have true and real faith, then works will follow. That's your fruit, right? That work that follows is the fruit. And that's what Yahusha is saying. You're going to be known by your fruit. Your fruit is the result of your faith. If you have faith and you hide it in the ground, right? If you have them talents and you hide them in the ground, what happens? No one gets, there's no return. There's no return, and then that talent gets taken from you. But if that talent that you have, if you have 2 and you make them 4 and 4 and you make 6 and 8 and you make 16 and all of those, and you multiply those talents, then you have those works is what and how your reward is determined. It's very simple. It's very simple. So although it's not a works-based salvation, your works play into your reward because your works are determined by your faith. If you have true faith, there will be works that follow. Right? Works will follow somebody that truly has faith. If you don't have faith, or you have a false faith, or you have a lip service faith, there'll be no works that follow that. All right? So we ended today on Revelation 22, verse 12. We'll pick up from 13 to the end next time. I thank you for bearing with me in this lesson. I hope you were able to get something out this lesson. Like I said, we'll continue with Revelation. What I want to do once we get to the end, I want to kind of move backwards. I want to do 21 and 22, and then I want to go to 12 and 13. And we're going to kind of move through Revelation, not linear, not in a linear fashion, but we're going to move through Revelation in kind of a different way. So we're going to hit 20, we're going to finish up 22, and then we're going to go 12 and 13. All right? I thank you. I bless you. And Yahuwah is real. Thank you.